Time for some big upgrades.
Keep things smooth this fall. Platinum package. With the Lawnmower 4.0, you can leave the shredding to the sacks and not your skin, thanks to proprietary advanced skin-safe technology. And because it's IPX7 rated, the band can play on, whether it's rain or shine. Of course, it's not all about the solo. You gotta give your backup singers their moment to shine. The crop gel will give them the smooth harmony they're after, while the crop exfoliator won't have you playing Rhapsody in Blue. Take 5 and go to manscaped.com/craftcomputing to get 20% off, free international shipping, and 2 additional free gifts. That's manscaped.com/craftcomputing. And remember, your balls will thank you.
Welcome back to Craft Computing, everyone. As always, I'm Jeff. I'm going to do something I don't normally do both in my personal or professional life, and that is upgrade a system after just one generation. Around this time last year, I built myself a 5950X based workstation for all of my video editing work here on the channel. And just 1 year later, I think I'm ready to upgrade already. Now, don't get me wrong, the system has been running pretty much flawlessly over the last year, but we've also made a monumental leap forward in CPU performance, both with AMD Ryzen 7000 series as well as 13th gen Raptor Lake. Now, like a lot of you, I was sitting at home watching all of the AMD Ryzen 7000 reviews and wondering what 13th gen Intel would bring to the party. Now, unfortunately, I didn't get my hands on any Intel 7000 chips at release, but I do have Intel's all-new 13900K CPU here. Now, full disclosure, Intel did send me over the 13900K as well as the 13600K for my review, but this video is in no way sponsored by Intel, absolutely no money changed hands, and the decision to upgrade my CPU is not because AMD just didn't sample me. It's actually because, based on reviews that I've seen from a number of different media outlets, the 13900K is the top-end consumer CPU at this time. Performance of the 5950X aside, there are also a couple issues with the system that I'd like to address. First off, it's a little bit loud for my liking. Now, when I use the Fantex Elite case, I just use the stock Fantex fans that came with it. And while they definitely do the job of keeping things fairly cool, they're not the quietest things in the world. So we're gonna try out a full set of Be Quiet 140mm Lightwing fans. And this will give me the added benefit of having a little bit more color options inside the system, thanks to the full addressable RGB. Secondly, I think the noise is partially to blame on the NZXT X73 Kraken cooler that I used. Now again, nothing against this cooler, it's just 120mm fans are inherently louder than 140mm fans. So I'm going to swap out for a Be Quiet Pure Loop FX2. And again, this will give me a little bit more surface area thanks to the 280mm radiator and match my fans all across the system. Since we're swapping from AMD to Intel, we're obviously going to have to replace the motherboard, so I went with an MSI Z790 Tomahawk DDR4 motherboard. Now, why DDR4 instead of DDR5? Well, I already have 128 gigabytes of DDR4 3600 MHz memory inside the system. And well, DDR5 is really freaking expensive, so I think this would be an upgrade that most anyone else would look at as pretty reasonable. Last but not least is the power supply. Now, I know this seems like kind of an odd thing to upgrade, especially because I'm only going from a 1000 watt to a 1000 watt. But the EVGA G3 1000 watt does sometimes hit its overtemp warning and ramp up to 100% fan speed, again, making the system fairly loud. So we're going to be swapping that out for a Be Quiet Straight Power 11 1000 watt platinum rated power supply. And this has a couple main advantages to it. Number one, the fan used inside of there is a Silent Wings 4 140mm fan, which should help with both airflow and keeping everything cool and quiet. Secondly, you can also pick up a Be Quiet 12-pin direct cable rather than using any of NVIDIA's adapters for their 3000 or 4000 series cards. So that's pretty much the plan. We're going to rip basically everything out of my old workstation, replace it with 13th gen Alder Lake parts, keeping only the video card, memory, and storage. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. Ta-da! Build is done, or as done as it's going to get. Now, like all systems that I build on here, it wasn't without some difficulty that was a little bit unforeseen. Let's talk about it. First and foremost, overall, I am very happy with the way this turned out, and it just reminded me how much I really love the Phanteks EnthUevolve X case. This thing is absolutely gorgeous, it's a dream to build in, there is plenty of room for everything, the cable management is insanely good, the built-in fan hub makes plugging everything in an absolute breeze. There's really no downsides to it. I also like how the build is a little bit more cohesive now. All of the fans match that are inside of there. We've got the little brushed silver Be Quiet logo on the front of the cooler right there that matches the brushed silver on the case. Just overall a little bit more of an attractive build. I'm just going to very quickly touch on performance here because that'll lead into some other talking points that I have about this system as a whole. And we're going to go right back to Cinebench R23, specifically with multi-threaded, because I use this system as my video editing workstation. Now, while Cinebench R23 isn't the be-all end-all, it is still pretty much the de facto overall CPU performance benchmark, especially when it comes to high-end multi-threaded performance. So on the 5950X, we scored a 24,233, which at the time that I built that system was about as high as you could get on a consumer chip. With the upgrade to the Core i9-13900K, not overclocked, straight out of the box with XMP enabled on the memory at 3600 megatransfers per second, we're looking at a score of 40,078. That's 16,000 faster. That's over a 50% improvement in one generation of CPUs. Same thread count, 32 threads, 50% up. If you want more performance numbers, go watch reviews from Hardware Unboxed or Linus Tech Tips. They have done an excellent breakdown on both this generation of CPUs and compared to the previous generation, both AMD and Ryzen. And they can give you more of a overall viewpoint than I possibly could with my limited experience, especially when it comes to Ryzen 7000. But I do have a couple of points to bring up about this being my workstation PC, and I use that word very carefully because this system, as much as it has RGB and an RTX 3090, is a workstation first and a gaming PC second. And when it comes to workstation class CPUs, I've got a couple bones to pick here. But since Intel doesn't have a current generation workstation motherboard or CPU combination, that's pretty much going to be the ire of this rant. Now again, this is a workstation PC first. In my previous system with the 5950X Ryzen, I did have the RTX 3090 installed, as well as a Sound Blaster X sound card, as well as a AverMedia 4K capture card, and that Asus 10 gigabit network card. You'll notice I had to remove the 4K capture card from the system though, and it's for very good reason. There's literally not enough PCI Express lanes to go around. Take this very well-equipped MSI Z790 Tomahawk motherboard, for example. It has an X16 PCI Express 5.0 slot on top and 4 X4 NVMe lanes. However, the rest of the PCI Express is a little bit lacking in my opinion. We have a single PCI Express X1 slot, and then what looks like an X16 slot on the bottom. However, there are only 4 lanes electrically connected to that. For someone who uses quite a few PCI Express expansion cards, both for NVMe storage and for general I/O, that's pretty limiting in this day and age. As you can see, my triple slot RTX 3090 takes up that top X16 slot and would cover 2 additional slots below it. However, there's no slots on the motherboard there, so that's not really that big of a deal. But if we go down to the next 2 slots, I've got my 1X sound card and my 4X 10 gigabit network card. I've maxed out this motherboard already. Even on the X570 Taichi motherboard that I removed, the situation isn't much better. It swaps 2 of the NVMe X4 slots for a single X8 slot electrically right here, and we have the same X1 and X4 expansion slots down below. So it's not like we're moving backwards at all, but we're not exactly moving forward when it comes to PCI Express connectivity. Now I know the majority of the PC and gaming market really only needs that X16 slot and maybe 1 or 2 slots for NVMe, but there is a huge gap in the market right now with people who do actually need expansion cards, and if you game stream, you might be one of them. Like I said, sure, I understand that I have a triple slot GPU installed in here, but most GPUs are coming as triple slot cards anyway. But let's say you wanted to stream from an Xbox One X or a PlayStation 5. Well, you'd need something like this, which is an AverMedia Live Gamer 4K, and if you notice, that takes up an X4 expansion slot. Yeah, you're pretty much full at that point. But in some ways, we really are regressing a little bit when it comes to connectivity. This Z790 Tomahawk motherboard from MSI is about $300, and it's not even close to the top of the line. We've also got the i9-13900K in there, which is a $600 CPU. Do you know what a $300 motherboard and $600 CPU used to get you? An X299 motherboard with a 7900X. Yeah. Now, while the 7900X was only 10 core and 20 thread, that same CPU would support up to 44 PCI Express lanes plus any additional lanes from the motherboard chipset, meaning that you could at the very least support at least 2 PCI Express X16 slots for graphics cards or high-demand I/O devices. Unfortunately, the way the market exists today, with consumer boards being limited to around 20 or 24 PCI Express lanes, and workstation boards being absolutely unobtainable with CPUs starting at $3,000 a piece, there's really nothing for the mid-range video editor or content creator to use. And unfortunately, that includes me. Last but not least, let's talk about the memory in this system. The keen-eyed among you may have noticed I swapped out the memory kit when upgrading to the 13900K. Yes, I did actually want to keep the 128 gigs of DDR4 memory. However, I couldn't get that kit of Patriot Viper running at the rated 3600 MTS speed. I think it was down to that kit not wanting to run in dual rank at higher speeds, as I had similar issues on the Ryzen 5950X system. However, at least when running on the AMD platform, I did get the memory to run at 3200 MTS. On the Z790, the best I could do was 2666, and honestly, that's just not going to cut the mustard. I wound up swapping out that kit for a 64GB kit of Oloy 3600 MTS, and it is running at the rated speed. So I'm a little disappointed we had to cut our memory capacity in half, but at least we're not going to lack any speed because of it. So, with my very limited testing on the 13900K, am I happy with this upgrade so far? Absolutely yes. I ran out of superlatives in my brain that I wanted to say there. This is definitely an upgrade from the 5950X, and based on all the reviews that I've seen from my compatriots, definitely an upgrade and step above the 7950X as well. But there is still a glaring gap in the market when it comes to workstation-grade motherboards, and I know I'm definitely not alone in that sentiment. Given the new normal of consumer pricing here, remember, we're still talking about a $300 motherboard and a $600 CPU here, I would expect to see some of those workstation class features start to work their way down. Things like more than dual channel memory, or more than 20 PCI Express lanes. However, we just haven't been seeing it, and as someone who does need to work on these machines professionally, I can't tell you how disappointing that is. So, while I definitely think I'm going to be happy with the performance of the 13900K, I haven't been able to upgrade another PC in my studio in pretty desperate need of it. My streaming PC is still running an MSI X299 Creation motherboard and an i7-7820X, simply because I have too many PCI Express slots that I need to run in this system to run on a modern consumer motherboard. Hopefully AMD won't be left alone in the workstation space with their Threadripper systems, and we'll be able to see Intel come in swinging and, again, bring competition to a much-needed industry. But, as it sits today, you've got to choose either speed or expansion. Before we go, a couple huge shoutouts to partners, without which this build would not have been possible. First off, Be Quiet is a regular supporter of this channel, so if you're interested in any of the parts that I used today, like the Pure Loop 2FX, the Lightwing fans, or the Straight Power 11 1000 watt power supply, make sure to check the links down in the video description. Other parts in today's build were sent over by Microcenter, where Black Friday starts now. They're helping you beat the lines with their Black Friday sales event going on November 7th through 27th. Check out their amazing deals in-store, from CPU and motherboard bundles to desktops and laptops. You won't see in-store exclusives like this anywhere else, so head down to your nearest Microcenter to get your deals today. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to Craft Computing if you haven't done so already. Follow me on Twitter at Craft Computing for daily shenanigans like this. And if you like the content you see on this channel and want to help support me in what I do, consider joining the Patreon. Link is also down in the video description. That's going to do it for me in this one. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys. Beer for today is from Anchorage Brewing Company. It is Lilith's Brethren, a double IPA clocking in at 8.4%, like a lot of Anchorage's IPAs. Now, the reason I say that is not a negative towards Anchorage, but a lot of what they do is they make one batch recipe for an IPA, and then they experiment with a bunch of different hop blends, different types of hopping the beer, and so while it's a very simple recipe as far as what they end up giving you, it's a really great deep dive if you're interested in learning what different types of hops taste like and the different styles of IPAs. Grab some Anchorage and start learning. So, Lilith's Brethren, this is a beer that I've had quite a few times before, and I may have even reviewed it here on the channel before. But like I said, Anchorage typically uses very similar recipes across all of their double IPAs, and then just mixes up the hops and how they put everything together. This particular beer is using Amarillo and Mosaic hops, and obviously they went for the hazy IPA. This one I really enjoy. This is obviously very hazy. It's very tropical, very citrus forward. It's almost like a pineapple guava cocktail. It does fall in line with a lot of the mid-2010s, teens hazy IPAs, where the acid profile can kind of build up on you. It can kind of start to mute a lot of the flavors. But I think the flavor in this is so good, I stopped caring that I can't taste it about halfway through. If that makes any sense at all.